Good past morning. Good post-lunch. Please join us. Please stand up.
We are here for you.
Not for me. my sadness from wherever you've been. Come broken hearted, let rescue begin. Come find your mercy, for sinner come near. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your head, heart, come as you are. There's hope for the hopeless and all those who stray. We'll sit at the table, come taste the grace. There's rest for the lovers, live as you are. There's joy for the morning, but sinner be still. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, you're not too much. So lay down your burdens, lay down your hearts, come as you are. Come as you are. Come as you are. Love is broken, like a ring of solid gold, like a vow that's tested, like a covenant of old. And your love is enduring through the winter rain, and beyond the horizon, mercy falls today. Faithful you have been, faithful you will be. You pledge yourself to me. This is why I sing your praise. Ever be on my lips, your praise will never be on my lips, never be on my lips. Father, the open, your kindness makes us whole, and you show our weakness, your strength becomes our own. Now you're making me like you, clothing me in white, bringing beauty for ashes. With you let your bride, free from all the guilt, rid of all the shame, and all my hurt today. It's why I sing your praise, never be on my I'll be hurting and broken within, overwhelmed by the weight of sin. Jesus is calling. As you come to the end of yourself, do you thirst for a drink from the well? Jesus is calling. Come to the altar, Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness is bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. Leave behind your regrets and mistakes. Come today, there's no reason to wait. Jesus is calling. Bring your sorrows and trade them for joy. From the ashes a new life is born. Jesus is calling. Come to the altar, Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness is bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. Come to the altar, Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness is bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. Oh, the Savior, isn't He wonderful? Sing hallelujah, Christ is risen. Bow down before Him, for He is Lord of all. Sing hallelujah, Christ is risen. Oh, what a Savior, isn't He wonderful? Sing hallelujah, Christ is risen. Bow down before Him, for He is Lord of all. Sing hallelujah, Christ is risen. Come to the altar, the Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness is bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. Come to the altar, the Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness is bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. Bear your cross as you wait for the crown. Tell the world of the treasure you found. God, that's our prayer that you would equip us to tell the world of treasure that we found. God, that you equip us each to embrace our calling, whatever it is that we do. That God, that we work together as a church to bring about our ultimate plan, which is renew heaven and earth and eternity with you. We thank you that that is your plan, that you've never given up on it. In Jesus' name.
Amen. As you head out to the tables, I just want to remind you that there aren't any assigned seats. If you want to change tables, have your conversation, that's fine. If you want to stay where you are, also fine. Just want to let you know that, so go to the tables. So, for this session, we're going to be reading one of my favorite collections of Dr. Seuss. He didn't always have collections. Many times they were single stories, but he has a couple different ones, and this is one, The Sneetches. I love The Sneetches, and it's one of Melody's favorites. One of the earliest books we ever got for her. So, if you've never heard it, it's 3 different stories in here, or 4 different stories. There's The Sneetches, The Zacks, Too Many Days, and What Was I Scared Of? And each of those stories has really one singular message. I'll see if you can see it before we dive in today. So, The Sneetches. And other stories by Dr. Seuss. The Sneetches. Now, the star-belly Sneetches had bellies with stars. The plain belly Sneetches had none upon theirs. Those stars weren't so big, they were really so small. You might think such a thing wouldn't matter at all. But because they had stars, all the star-belly Sneetches would brag, "We're the best kind of Sneetch on the beaches." With their suits in the air, they'd sniff and they'd snort, "We'll have nothing to do with that plain belly sort." And whenever they met someone, they were out walking, they'd pipe right on past them without even talking. When the star-belly children went out to play ball, could a plain belly get in the game? Not at all. You could only play if your belly had stars, and the plain belly children had none upon theirs. When the star-belly Sneetches had Frankfurter roast, or picnics, or parties, or marshmallow toast, they never invited the plain belly Sneetches. They left them out cold in the dark of the beaches. They kept them away, never let them come near, and that's how they treated him, year after year. Then one day it seems, while the plain belly Sneetches were moping and doping alone on the beaches, just sitting there wishing their bellies had stars, a stranger zipped up in the strangest of cars. "My friends," he announced in a voice clear and clean, "my name is Sylvester McMonkey McBean. I've heard of your troubles, I hear you're unhappy, but I can fix that, I'm a fixed up chappie. I've come here to help you, I have what you need, my prices are low and I work at great speed, and my work is 100% guaranteed." Then quickly Sylvester McMonkey McBean put together a very peculiar machine, and he said, "You want stars like a star-belly Sneetch? My friends, you can have them for $3 each. Just pay me your money and hop right aboard." So they clambered inside, and the big machine roared, and it conked, and it bonked, and it jerked, and it burped, and it bopped them about, but the thing really worked. When the plain-belly Sneetches popped out, they had stars. They actually did. They had stars upon theirs. Then they yelled at the ones who had stars from the start, "We're exactly like you. You can't tell us apart. We're all the same now, you snooty old smarties, and now we can go to your Frankfurt parties." "Good grief," groaned the ones who stars at the first. "We're still the best Sneetches, and they are the worst. But how in the world will we know," they all frowned, "if which kind is what, or the other way round?" Then up came McBean with a very sly wink, and he said, "Things are not quite as bad as you think. So you don't know who's who, that's perfectly true. But come with me, friends, you know what I'll do? I'll make you again the best Sneetches on beaches, and all it'll cost you is $10 each." "Belly stars are no longer in style," said McBean. "What you need is a trick to my star-off machine. This wondrous contraption will take off your stars, so you won't look like the sneeches while then on Mars. And that very handy machine, working very precisely, removed all the stars from their tongues quite nicely. Then with snoots in the air, they paraded about and they opened their beaks and they let out a shout, "We know who's who, now there is no doubt. The best kind of sneeches are the sneeches without." Then of course, those with stars all got frightfully mad. To be wearing the star now was frightfully bad. Then of course, old Sylvester McMonkey invited them into his star-off machine. Then of course, from then on, as you probably guessed, things got into a horrible mess. All the rest of that day on those wild screaming beaches, the fix-it-up chappie kept fixing up sneeches. On again, off again, in again, out again, through the machines they were rounded about again, changing their stars every minute or two. They kept paying money, they kept going through until neither the plane or the star boys knew whether this one was that one, or that one was this one, or which one was what one, or what one was who. Then with every last cent of his money was spent, the fix-it-up chappie packed up and he went. And he laughed as he drove in his car up the beach. They never will learn to know. You can't teach a sneech. But McBee was quite wrong. I'm quite happy to say that the sneeches got really quite smart on that day. The day that they decided that sneeches are sneeches, and no kind of sneech is the best on the beaches. The day they decided that to forget about stars and whether they had one or not. The Zacks. One day making tracks in the prairie of tracks came a north-going Zacks and a south-going Zacks. And it happened that both of them came to a place where they bumped. There they stood, foot to foot, face to face. "Look here now," the north-going Zack said. "I say, you are blocking my path. You are right in my way. I'm a north-going Zacks and I always go north. Now get out of my way and let me go forward." "Who's in whose way?" snapped the south-going Zacks. "I always go south, making south-going tracks. So you're in my way, and I ask you to move and let me go south in my south-going groove." The north-going Zacks puffed his chest up with pride. "I never," he said, "take a look as a rule, for I learned as a boy, south-going school never budge. That school never budge in the least, not an inch." Those empty pants and I smile. How do they scream and cry? You know. And each one of those stories has, what's the main theme in them that connects them together? Why are they all put together? Well, he probably had different reasons. Maybe it was just they were the ones that they were all small enough to where they didn't get their own book, but they wanted to put them together. What's the main theme of the sneeches? What did they get? They forgot about stars and whether they had one or not upon Mars. The Zacks, they left them standing, unbudged in their tracks. Too many days. But she didn't do it, and now it's too late. What was I scared of? They never shake their chin, but we both smile, and we say, hi. I honestly think that when we start looking at this, the sneeches tells us how we are to love. What love looks like. We'll talk even more about this tonight with a different book, but I think it begins a discussion of what love looks like. In the sneeches, we see something important. We begin to see what the object of our love is supposed to be. When we look at the sneak, people can be wicked, evil, and focus on unimportant things because they want to be better than others. And it seems so small, or it should seem small and insignificant to us. We think, oh, why did they fight? They look exactly the same except for the stars. And yet, but that's the point, right? He's writing this in a time where people were separated by the color of their skin. In many ways, in many places around the world today, and even in the United States, that's still true, where there is a separation of people based on the color of their skin. They were being focused, they got focused on the stars on belly, and they forgot about the star over Bethlehem. And we do the same. We get so bent out of shape about the color of the skin that we can't see that God made us all. Let's look at something that Jesus said. Turn into your Gospels. There's a couple different Gospels listed out there. Luke 10, 27, Matthew 22, 36 through 40, and Mark 12, 29 through 31. Each one of them, pick one that you want to turn to. They're telling the same story. The same story plays out in all the synoptics. A guy comes up and asks a question. This is where we're coming to the story at this point. The guy's come up and asks a question, and he says, "Teacher, which command is the greatest? What's the most important of all?" Luke, what must I, Luke, in Luke it's different. What must I do to inherit eternal life? In both Matthew and Mark, answering the Pharisees, what they were trying to do is either the Pharisees had two goals: take the laws of the Bible and expand it, which turned into all these many hundreds and thousands of laws that were very meticulous. How to do this, how to do that, how to do not only do hand washing before you eat, but how to do it, what to use, what kind of water to use, all these things that came up. And then the other Pharisees were saying, okay, instead of going crazy with laws, let's just get it back to one. What's the one law? And so they're asking, what is the greatest command? We don't want to have, you're in the camp of maybe there's just one, what is it? Luke sounds a little different, but it's a similar question: what leads to salvation? Which laws must I keep in order to attain salvation? And what does he say? Luke 10:27. He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself." It's the same thing that he says in Matthew. Love the Lord God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the greatest and most important commandment. The second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets depend on these two commandments. Mark 12, 29 through 31. The most important, Jesus answered, "Listen, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength." The second is love your neighbor as yourself. There is no greater commandment than these. In Matthew, he says that the two commands, in some versions it says they sum up the law and the prophets. They tie it all together and put a nice little bow on it. And the answer that Jesus gives is intriguing for a couple reasons. It's not one command, but it's two. What's the one greatest? He says, well, I want one. Narrow it down. What's the one thing that I should focus on? And Jesus says, not good enough. I'm going to change the rules of the question. I'm not going to answer that one. I'm going to answer a different one. And the first one is no surprise, right? What is it when he says, "Listen, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God"? What's that command? Have you heard what it's called?
Shema.
Shema, yes, good, all right. Most of you knew that, didn't? It's Hebrew for listen. It's a command to listen, Israel. And so it's when he says the Shema, that love the Lord your God, that's the greatest commandment. Listen, Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. They expected that one, right? It's totally expected. When you ask what's the greatest commandment, it's the one that everyone wanted to say was their first words when they were able to speak and their last words on their deathbed. It's the case that practice in some Jewish communities today that they'll quote Deuteronomy 6 forward when they're dying, so that the last words out of their mouth can be the great, "Listen, Israel, the Lord your God, Yahweh your God, Yahweh alone." And that's their command. But the second one is not expected. And the second one is one that I think is fascinating. Because where does it come from? Leviticus 19:18b. It's the second half of Leviticus 19:18. Jesus says, "Do not bear a grudge against your neighbor." Leviticus 19:18 starts with, "Do not bear a grudge against your neighbor, but love your neighbor as yourself." So Jesus says the greatest commandment is the greatest one that we all know and is wonderful and amazing. It's the biggest one. And the second one is a small part in Leviticus. And I am lifting it up and bringing it out of Leviticus and saying it's the second one only to the Shema. That's big. That's huge. That's Jesus saying, I see what the most important thing is, and it's loving God and others. But the more important than the fascinating theological points is this. When we look to the words of Jesus Christ, there isn't wiggle room around those to whom we must give our love. We don't get to cherry pick who we love. Love God, love people, full stop. Love God with everything. Love neighbor, and when he explains who the neighbor is, it's everyone that you come in contact with. Who is my neighbor? Her body. You don't get to pick. It's simple, but it's not easy. And so when we spell this out, it is, what if they are red, yellow, black, and white? Love them. What if they are gay or transgender? Love them. What if they are Muslim or Buddhist? Love them. What if they are a Packers or Purdue fan? Love them. I don't know who you're, Ohio State fan. I don't know. Whoever's the guy that you hate, those are the people that you're called to love. You don't get a choice. You signed on to the Jesus thing. You said, and I said. So we said, right? We said, yeah, salvation sounds good. I'd rather have that than the alternative. So Jesus said, great, but you've got to love some people. We don't get to say back to him, nah, I'm good, thanks. I'd rather not. I'd rather not have to love people. I'd rather not have to have those kinds of icky conversations where I have to love them and, deal with their problems. I'd rather not have that. We don't get that option. Paul goes a step further in Galatians 5:14. For the entire law is fulfilled in one statement. One statement, Galatians 5:14. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law. The first 5, if you want a cliff notes of the first 5 books of the Bible, love your neighbor as yourself. There you go. I mean, that's worth your money right there. That's good stuff. And that's what that's what he's talking about. So when the Sneetches forgot about the stars on the bellies, they began to see the Sneetch underneath. And the Sneetches underneath were loved by God, all on all of the beaches. When we look at this, turn to your fellow table mates. For each of us, the different objects of our love make loving difficult. What's the hardest part about loving God? What's the hardest part about loving other people? What's the hardest part about, I didn't talk about it much, but loving yourself? For many of us, it may be very easy to love other people because we see the good in them, but it can be very hard for us to love ourselves. What's the hardest part about that? How can we all love better? And maybe those are very deep questions, and you're going to have a hard time kind of coming up with the words for that. But think about that. What's the hardest part about the different objects of our love? Loving them rightly. Give yourself a couple minutes to talk about that when you're taking.
Loving God is right with each one person that you can see, touch, hear, think about it.
Not an immediate response.
Thankful. Love and then follow. And just for the other part,
The hardest thing about all the people sometimes is that they feel not showing the same love back no matter how hard you try.
I gotta do that one because
Sometimes.
yeah, that part.
How love came.
Yes. Yeah. One of you fast for that.
Maybe the hardest part.
You don't feel it. That's good at all.
I am reducing them to interact with them at the class. Feel like they do, but not to seeing them as a child of God, loved by God, and desires of God. I don't know if I ever did that. And the words of one another like this, but I reduce them to whatever annoyance that it's got. We would have a discussion.
Loving is like other people were
Sometimes it's hard to cut myself. Sometimes you feel like it's easier to love yourself or something.
It's hard to love myself because whenever I fit one, I just Get better, get better. It's easy.
Oh.
I think it's part of it. I think it's because there are people who are aware.
Yeah.
Easy to love.
All right, and let's keep moving on. So the objects of our love. I hope it was maybe get a chance to talk about how not only why it's hard to love, but maybe how to love better. Maybe that can help you start thinking about how to love better, both with people and God and ourselves. But I want to talk about differences. I don't want to harp on it too long because we talked about it already about what makes us different. But I want to talk about too many days. So God called me to love everybody. So you may be saying God called me to love everybody, and that's really easy because I'm going to view everyone kind of as the same, as their monolith. And I was thinking about this when I was reading this, and I was going, oh, this reminds me of Scrubs. There's an episode where he goes, to make this easy on myself, I'm going to call all the men's Daves and all the women Debbies. And then he said there was a woman whose name actually was Debbie, so he was going to call her Slagathor. So he saw all the guys, Daves and Debbies and Slagathor, were all the ones that is how he saw people. That's how the Dr. Cox, is that who that was? Kelso, Bob Kelso. How he viewed people. When we look at others, when we're seeing other people, are we seeing them as a monolith, or are we seeing them as the individual? It isn't just about seeing the human and loving the generic human being. It's about seeing the person, the Jake, and the John, the Jeannie, and the Andrew, and seeing those people and loving them, even them, right? That gets difficult when you're talking about the Jakes. We could spend more time on it, but let's focus on this. We aren't all those bits and pieces that we were before. We aren't all eyes and ears and mouth and nose. That is what it means to be the body of Christ. What we need to do is actually celebrate the individualness of believers. We celebrate the differences that we have. So when you think about, am I loving this person, this object of my love, am I seeing them as a Dave or a Debbie, or am I seeing them as who they are in themselves? Think about the differences sitting around the room today. What is one way you could celebrate those differences in here? Shout it out. This is kind of an idea. What are the things you could say that could help you celebrate the differences that we see? Yeah. That we have some people who have the ability to get up there and sing and play and lead the group. Absolutely.
Could you restate the question?
Now, what do you mean by celebrate?
What are things that you see that make people individuals and that we can say, this is great that you are that way? I've been talking about it a lot, but I like the fact that we have introverts and extroverts, and that some people they hold a lot of their thoughts in quietly, but when they let them out finally, they're really, really good, because I go through a lot of junk before we get to the good stuff. Other people, they just hold it all in and they get it. I like that, I appreciate that. And I think that that's something we should celebrate. We should celebrate the fact that we don't all have to be a certain way. We all have to be extroverted and shouting out all of our ideas all the time. Other things that we can celebrate, differences that we can see, whether that's differences in abilities, like you said, with that, difference in personality traits.
Although see it with you.
Oh, thanks.
Just like being able to plan an event like this, it takes a lot of people with different skills.
Yeah.
There are people to teach, people to lead music.
People to make crafts and activities. I'm terrible at that. garbage, you can't do it. And so having people, that's something that, yeah, absolutely right, having people who can take the different bits and who can think up new ideas, and I say, here's my ideas, I can do the teach stuff pretty well, try to come up with that, but I didn't do this isn't me. I don't have the art skill for that. So, like, yeah. So, and we have people who are tall to hang stuff up, you know, look at what he can do, it's awesome. I saw a hand go up, did I see a hand?
I was thinking from during the Bluebill prayer, looking at the different sculpted prayers, appreciating different levels of artistry that could still tell me what they were praying for, and just said, like I said, I'm going to pray for this because I can tell what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked the different ways that people went at putting their prayer down.
Yeah.
Whether they were highly artistic or me, it's still, you can figure out something that they were looking at.
Mm-hmm. I just think it's important to recognize that as you go forward, not to think about this person in front of me. What is the way that God has made them, and how can I appreciate them for that? Not just when you're telling someone, I really do love you, and I appreciate you as my brother or my sister in Christ. It's also, well, what specifically has God shaped them to be, and really lean into that. Ask that kind of question. And then we move to the path toward our love. So we have the objects of our love, and those objects are diverse. And then we say we're supposed to love all people, and all people in their difference. But then when we have different people that we have to do life with, how can we possibly see eye to eye when it comes to anything? If we're all so different. And this is where the Zacks comes into play. You know, the world passed around them because they were too stubborn, too darn stubborn. When we look from the outside, seeing highways built over them and roads built around them, we laugh, shaking our heads, and say, silly Zacks, what are they thinking? Don't they see this is ridiculous? But how many times in our most heated arguments and our biggest discussions do we do the exact same? The Zacks should be able to move left or right, and even if they don't want to move to the east or to the west, why don't they just froggy hop? Right? I mean, just like one goes down, the other one hops over, you're good to go. But even that, they were not going to budge. And so what they were saying is that we were not going to do any of those things. You can't expect me to compromise. You can't expect me to come to terms with this. I am going north. I am going south. And both of them ended up going nowhere. And so when we think about this, we get to say, what would God do in our path towards love? And that's where we turn to Ephesians 5, 15 through 21. And this is what he says. We'll apply this into this Zacks and into our situation. Paul's writing, he says, pay careful attention then to how you walk, not as unwise people, but as wise, making the most of the time because the days are evil. So don't be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. And don't get drunk with wine, which leads to reckless actions, but be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing and making music from your heart to the Lord, giving thanks always for everything to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, submitting to one another in the fear of Christ. Submitting to one another. What is submission? I don't know if that's a question I have down there. What is submission? Oh, I do have that. We'll read our other thing and then we'll come back to that question. Philippians 2:3 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or empty pride, but in humility consider others more important than yourself. Well, that's interesting. It's not, I have written down here, friendship is not maintained by compromise. Friendship is maintained by compromise. Christian love is maintained by submission. What does it mean to submit? And what are some of the ways you have to submit to others in your life? And that's a question for the big group. What does it mean to submit?
Submission is willingly turning yourself over to someone else's authority or will.
Willingly turning yourselves over to someone else's authority or will. Okay?
I think that has to be will.
Okay.
Submission is will.
want you to expand on that. What does that mean?
You just do. There are times when it's not what you wanted, you would rather not do it, but if you don't do it, it won't go anywhere.
Yeah.
To a degree, that's being willing, but
It's not where the heart is. I mean, there's a prime example of that, right? Jesus in the garden is saying, Lord, if there's any way that I don't have to die on the cross, if there's any way I don't have to be separated from you because of the sin that you're going to heap on me, if there's any way I don't have to go through the torture and the pain of death, anyway, okay, let's do that. Let's go down that road. You've listened to me from now. I've turned water into wine. I've raised a person from the dead. If there's any way that I can get out of this, that it can all go right, and I don't have to go through this, let it happen. And yet, he says, but not my will, but yours be done. His submission, so I think the willing is a good word to have in there, but I also think, because that's where we should want to be, but at some points it's not there, and yet it's saying, but yet not my will. But yet not what I desire, but what is best for the group.
I think we should work towards willingly submitting.
Yeah.
When we, that sometimes has to, you're submitting, like John said, you're not willing to doing it.
Right.
We should work towards.
Absolutely. It should be a path towards that. That's where we want to end up, is saying, I'm going to, instead of compromising, instead of saying, this person wants blue carpet and this person wants red carpet, so we get purple carpet, right? Yeah, exactly. Or we just say, if you want blue carpet, get out, blue carpeters, down with the blue carpeters, up with the red carpeters, right? Like, instead of doing stuff like that, and I know those are silly things, and for a lot of us, that may not be the thing that our church is talking about, but what is it? Because you know that there's that dumb thing, that thing that just drives you crazy, that happens, that people are like, why are we not doing this? And you in your mind go, I know what we should be doing. Why is this not happening? I know that you have a thing in your church where you're like that. And yet, the question is, what does submission look like? And for us, it may be submitting to the less, like, the worst outcome because you don't want to cause a kerfuffle. I just know that in leadership sometimes I would really like this to happen, and I know that this is probably the best step forward, but it would cause too much division and hurt and pain for people to get through. And so you have to say, I have to be where we are at the moment. We don't just go, we're not called to compromise, we're called to submit. And of course, this is not about biblical principles, it's not about compromising our faith or even submitting to wrong beliefs, but it's about submitting to the wills of others and saying, I want the best for this whole community. And sometimes that means that my will gets put to the side. If 99 people are saying, you want blue carpet, and you're thinking, I really want red, that's not something that, it's one of those things where maybe blue carpet's the right way to go, and I just don't see it yet. And then you have to say, what if that's other cases in the church? What if there are 99 things that's like, this is actually where I think, they're thinking we're supposed to go this way, and they are wise people with the Spirit of God. If wise people with the Spirit of God are saying we should maybe go this way, the question is, where am I in relation to that? Am I seeing something right, or am I seeing something wrong? We don't just go for compromise. It would be wonderful to have unanimous agreement. And are we always going to get there? Maybe not, but we should strive for it. But then we have to say, okay, so we have the objects of our love, people, God, people, and ourselves, and people in all of their difference, right? The diversity of our love. And we know that the path towards love is through submission and through giving up of our own desires and seeing the desires of others. What's the benefit of our love? And this is what old man John has to say about it. This is 1 John 4, starting verse 16. And we have come to know and to believe that God has, the love that God has for us. God is love. And the one who remains in love remains in God and God in him. And this love is perfected with us, so that we may have confidence in the day of judgment. for we are hid. We are as he is in the world. There is no fear in love. Instead, perfect love drives out fear, because fear involves punishment. So the one who fears has not reached perfection in love. We love God, we love our neighbor, and in this we know that we are God's children, and fear is driven out. Think of the times that you've been afraid of other people or of God. Were they people that you knew well, or people that you didn't know? And then we just have to think about that. When you're afraid of God, was it a time when you were seeking God passionately, or just going through the motions? With those ideas in your head, those times that you've been afraid, or those times that you've been afraid of people or God, talk to your tables about how can we overcome our fear in healthy ways.
Crashing the car in the parking lot.
I don't mean to use it, I mean,
Somewhere like, you're going to church, I'm going to go back, turn back, and go.
All right. I think one of the things that I hope that maybe you were talking about in your groups when you're talking about how to overcome fear, is that I think that what we've been talking about of perfect love drives out fear, that's what we see. I think it's true of God, but I think God has shown it should be true of humans as well. When we begin to try and love those who don't look like us, those who don't act like us, those who don't worship like us, those who don't marry like us, we begin to stop fearing them. There's something to be said for the words like homophobia and xenophobia. People who dislike gay people or hate immigrants are not actually afraid, but their hatred belies a deeper fear. Without knowing or trying to know people who are different, they can't know that they are more similar to us than they are different. people who are of all the different strata of life, different ways of living. We are more similar than we are different, because deep inside of us we have a spark of the divine. God has said, these are people made in my image, which is why we talk about Genesis 1:26 and 27. That love drives out our deepest fear. That love, truly loving other people, without condoning everything that other people may stand for, but truly loving them drives out the deepest fear of our hearts. When we love our fellow humans in the world, we are no longer afraid of them. When we love our brothers and sisters, we show the world that we are the disciples of Christ. When we love each other, the love of God remains in us and is perfected in us. When we love, we know that we stand forgiven and saved. Prayer is the number one way to love someone else. And I truly do believe that. I don't just write that. I truly believe it. Every time I've had a bad issue with someone, and someone's made me real bad, when I go to God in prayer about that person, every time I've been humbled and had to forgive. Because God is saying, I want their salvation too. It doesn't make dealing with people any easier. It doesn't fix all the problems, the damage that they may cause in our churches, in our families, in the communities that we're a part of may still be there. But when I say it's the number one way to love someone, it's because you really can't keep hating someone. Maybe you could be angry, maybe justifiably angry. Someone I've been praying for very recently, who's I'm justifiably mad at, and yet God says, keep loving. You don't get to hate. You don't get that option. I've called you to love. So when we think about that, we can't easily hate, and I think therefore we can't easily fear people when they are in our prayers. So what I want you to do is to group up around here. I wrote this before. I knew that we'd have kind of ready-made groups. Circle up around your tables and pray for one another. You can share a short prayer request, or just be like, I don't really have anything. If you don't have anything, but share a little bit, and we'll take some actual time to pray for one another and to sit in prayer. I know we did that just before, but in a group setting. If you don't feel like praying, you could also share that. If you say, I'm not sure I have the words to say right now, we know that you're going to be praying along with this in your heart. So that will be how we end this session. And once we're done here, you're free to go back to the org house.